Welcome to meeting number 86 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance, and pursuant to Standing Order 108 Bracket 2 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, April 20th, 2023, the committee is meeting to discuss the subject matter of Bill C-47, Divisions 1 to 9, 32 to 34, and 37, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 28th, 2023. A reminder to the members that other divisions of Part 4 will be studied at a subsequent meeting. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23rd, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and the members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. And a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raised hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Now, members, we have 22 great officials with us today, as I understand. So I'd love to read out all their names and their titles and everything that they do, but that would take a great deal of time. So they have chosen a spokesperson. Mr. Countryman is going to be speaking on behalf of the team of officials. And just before we get that, I do see a hand up. MP Sainte-Marie?
Oui,
Yes, just a point of order. Thank you, Chairman, and welcome to all of the public servants. Thank you for coming. The members of the committee recently talked about the possibility of sending parts of C-47 to other committees. So I'd like to ask the Liberals and Terry, government representative, on this matter. I'd like to ask you, Terry, whether you're going to come up with a proposal for the parts that should be sent to other committees by next Tuesday, and we'd wait that. We really much look forward to that, or else we can come up with a proposal. And before we get an answer, I'd just like to recall that to the Minister of Finance that we asked for a question of clarification a few weeks ago about the Green Growth Fund in the budget, and that we wanted to have a breakdown per province and per sector. And the clerk, on behalf of the committee, reminded the minister, and we got acknowledgement of receipt. So we're eagerly awaiting that data as well.
That is noted. So about your question and getting an answer to that from the ministry, and I know we're going to go to PS Beach right now in terms of the letter that we had intended or intend to send out to a number of committees. And clerk, can you just update us? The letter's ready? Yep.
Yes, so the letter is ready. The only thing we need from the committee is which committees we want to send letters to and which parts we want to send to which committees. Basically, it's all the information that's missing at the moment.
Okay, thank you. PS Beach?
Yep. Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday. Thanks for that question, Gabrielle. And that has been something that we've been considering and discussing with various members about. It was something that Mr. Chambers had brought up earlier as well. So I am working on something, and I think before next Tuesday is easy. I could probably talk to you even later today about where I think how we could do it. In fact, I could probably talk to all critics later today about how we think we could do it. Yeah, I think we can get moving on that, and it would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you, PSB. And I see a thumbs up from MP Sainte-Marie. Okay, great. And now we'll get into our meeting on the BIA. And Mr. Countryman, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, members. Thank you for allowing us for the invitation to come and appear for you today. I'm Galen Countryman. I'm the Director General of the Federal Provincial Relations Division at the Department of Finance. I'm joined by many of my colleagues from the Department of Finance here today, Financial Sector Policy Branch in particular, to speak to Divisions 1 to 9, 32 to 34, and 37 of Part 4 of the Budget Implementation Act. So a great pleasure to be here today. Merci.
Well, thank you very much. And you do have a great team, and I know the members look forward to asking you many questions. So we're going to start with our first round of questions, and each party will have up to 6 minutes to ask those questions. We'll start with the Conservatives. Have MP Chambers for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome. It's nice to see everybody in person. Most of these have been done virtually, so it's nice to see you. Congratulations on another budget. We had a good discussion with some of your colleagues earlier this week, but I just wanted to thank the analysts for another good, thorough, suggested line of questioning for today, so I'll draw on a little bit of that. But before we start, I wanted just more of a high-level overview of some of the changes to the Proceeds of Crime and Money Laundering Act, specifically as it relates to information sharing. Can someone just maybe give maybe a 30-second overview about what's being changed there?
Yes, thank you very much for your question. My name is Erin Hunt. I'm the Director General of Financial Crimes and Security at the Department of Finance, and it would be my pleasure to give you an overview of the information sharing components or proposals related to the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act. And in fact, there's also a proposal with respect to the criminal code. So maybe I'll start with that one because that one's a little bit separate. So it will improve, the proposal with respect to the criminal code would allow for a attorney general to seek a warrant with respect to seeking information regarding tax, and it adds additional offenses under which it would simplify that warrant process. So that's the criminal code change. There's also several proposals to improve information sharing under the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act. And first, the one would assist FINTRAC, which is Canada's financial intelligence unit, the Financial Transactions and Report Analysis Centre, to provide strategic analysis related to threats to national security. This is something that addresses a gap that our security and intelligence establishment asked for to be able to understand and provide more strategic intelligence to them to address threats to national security.
Oh, okay, just a quick question.
Yep,
I don't mean to cut
problem.
you off, just my time is short. It's my understanding that the information sharing provisions are to allow more information to go from government. The government is a key actor in the information sharing. Curious if the Privacy Commissioner has been consulted on some of these changes yet.
Yes, the Privacy Commissioner, as well as we've reviewed it from a Charter and Rights and Freedoms perspective as well.
Okay.
And there are very clear protections within the Act itself that protect the information and personal information in those contexts.
That's good. The industry, in fact, it was this committee, at least maybe last Parliament or two Parliaments ago, that recommended that the information sharing provisions within the Proceeds of Crime and Money Laundering Act, as it relates to allowing financial institutions to share information between themselves as it relates to money laundering, be updated. Those are not in this package of amendments, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Are you familiar with Section 7311, which deals with giving penalties under the Act? It's not if you're okay. I'm not trying to
I would have
test
to
you or
take that
trick you.
question back,
That's
but
fair.
I'm happy to listen to the question and take it back.
So that section says that any penalties given under the Proceeds of Crime and Money Laundering Act are only to be assessed to enforce compliance of the Act, not to punish. Right? So it's not like a criminal code provision where it's not used for deterrence for other people. It's used just to make sure people comply. That is a very problematic provision because we don't really see many people getting significant penalties under the Proceeds of Crime and Money Laundering Act. And to your knowledge, has anybody been sent to prison?
So my understanding is there's two separate commitments there. There's one related to administration of the Act, and those penalties are to try to promote compliance with the Act so that our reporting entities contribute to fighting financial crimes across the country. There are also criminal penalties for criminal violations of the compliance components, and that's a separate consideration and separate parts of the Act.
Would it be a fair question to ask if in the last 2 or 3 years anyone has received jail time under a... I'm not expecting you to answer that now, but if that is something
I would prefer to come back to you on that.
Of course, and I'm happy to refine that question so it's not onerous and respect your time, of course. I think I have 30 seconds left, Mr. Chair, and I'll yield it to the floor because I go over from time to time.
Oh, no, MP Chambers, well, thank you, but you are very punctual, I'll tell you. We're going to MP Chattel now for 6 minutes, please, for the Liberals.
Bonjour.
Good morning, and thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your excellent work. I know that when it's budget time, it's not easy for you, and we can see that you've worked extraordinarily well. So thank you and congratulations for another great budget and exemplary BIA, which we've come to expect from the Finance Department. I have a question for Ms. Hunt. I would like to turn to the proposals. There's good measures in here. Thank you. I think we have to make progress with these files. They're very important, of course. I'm interested to know your opinion on where we're at in terms of risk management and money laundering and proceeds of crime. I know that the GAFI has made lots of recommendations during the years, the FATF. So how far have you got in implementing these international standards on money laundering? Have you implemented all of the recommendations from the FATF, or is there still some work to do?
The Government of Canada takes anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing very seriously and looks at it from both a domestic perspective as well as an international perspective. And Canada, at the Financial Action Task Force, which is the international body that creates the standards for international anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing regimes, evaluated Canada most recently in 2016, and then we were updated in 2021. And in fact, Canada received improvements in terms of how it's meeting its regime in that circumstance. So we are moving forward. That said, Canada's regime isn't without some deficiencies and gaps, particularly in terms of enforcement. And so the government continues to look at how the anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing regime can be improved. And this is why it's proposing this series of measures in the budget to be able to continue to ensure that our anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing regime can adapt and evolve to meet the emerging threats, both in terms of anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing, but also in terms of emerging threats to national security and foreign interference.
Merci, Madame Hunt.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hunt. I'd like to say that the international FATF standards are minimum standards. We can always do more, but I'm concerned, and my colleagues as well, we've talked about this a great deal, we're concerned that perhaps we're not respecting these minimum standards in terms of, for example, tax havens, tax shelters. And these jurisdictions that don't have the same capacities as us. So why are we not able to meet these standards?
Question. These standards are established through a multilateral body and through negotiation amongst various jurisdictions. And so the standards are ones that all jurisdictions seek to achieve, but not all jurisdictions are able to meet the obligations to the same way across the board. And that's understood. Canada is amongst the strongest countries in the Foreign Financial Action Task Force in terms of its regime, but everyone recognizes that continual improvements need to be made. There's also a recognition that our legal system is not the same as every other legal jurisdiction, and therefore different ways of approaching issues will have to be taken into consideration in the Canadian context.
Merci.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to the day when Canada will be number one, top of the class when it comes to implementing these minimum standards, and you can work, or you can count rather, on the work of this committee to give you a helping hand. I still have time for another question. Very good. So let's change subject then. And this time, I'd like to say I'm very encouraged with the measures I've seen in the budget to ensure that Canada can be very successful in the green economy of tomorrow. There's a great deal of investment that's been announced in there. And one comment that I hear a great deal from companies in my own riding and across Canada is the efforts when it comes to R&D, research and development. It seems that Canada's perhaps lagging slightly behind. And within the committee, we've talked about the challenges in this sector, the manufacturing sector and other sectors, to try and stimulate further investments into research and development. So I'm very happy to hear that we're going to establish the Canada Innovation Corporation, an independent corporation, in order to further strengthen this. So could you give us more details as to how this corporation is going to be set up, and what are the tools that are going to be at its disposal?
For the question. I'm here. My name is Greg Reed. I'm a Director General in the Department of Finance. I'm joined by colleagues from Innovation Science and Economic Development. It's a joint team that has developed the legislation that you refer to enact the Canada Innovation Corporation. So the corporation and within the legislation itself describes a purpose in Article 9 and several functions that will guide the corporation as it becomes established and moves into market to deal with Canadian businesses. You're quite right that we're seized with the imperative to improve the productive capacity of Canadian businesses, and the increase in business expenditures in research and development is a well-regarded and very important way that we can assess and understand this capacity amongst Canadian businesses. So the corporation is an arm's-length entity. The Crown Corporation structure is designed so that on a day-to-day basis, the corporation, through its board of directors, through its CEO and staff, can have the ability to allocate funding for research and development projects, financial assistance in the forms of either grants or contribution-like form, depending on the nature of the project. But in addition to financial assistance, of course, there's other important elements that can contribute to succeeding the purpose to maximize.
I see, Mr. Reed. Yeah, and maybe you can, and a follow-up,
Sure.
as we get into more questions, you can add more to that. We are going to the block, and MP Sainte-Marie, please.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning to all of the senior public servants. Thank you for being here to answer our questions. We're having interesting discussions, and thank you, Sophie, for having put that question to you as regards money laundering and also tax evasion. We need to do more, and I also hope that Canada will pull out all the stops to effectively fight against that and reach these international standards. Now, on Tuesday, I asked your colleagues to do the necessary follow-up on this question about Section or Division 31 on royal titles and the law on royal titles. I found it very strange that King Charles III, by the grace of God, is hidden into C47, and Division 31 towards the end, he slipped in there. So I'd asked your colleagues to pass the message on to you, because I raised it last time. I wasn't at the Parliament then. Has that been done, and why was it hidden into this BIA Act towards the end? Thank you for that question. We are not able to answer that question. It would need to be the Privy Council colleagues that would answer. So I've taken note, and I'll pass on that question. Yes, so if we could have an answer in writing, that'd be very much appreciated on the Royal Style and Titles Act. Then last Wednesday, the adopted Bill C46, and one of the parts under C46 is the $2 billion health transfers without conditions, and we also find it in C47. And if C47 is not amended, and if this part is not removed, we understand that there would be $2 billion in C46, and then we would add another $2 billion in C47. Is that the case? Yes, the $2 billion are in the two bills. So in Bill C46, it's now before the Senate. So the intention is not to give $2 billion twice, obviously. So the government is going to come back to explain how to proceed and coordinate between the two bills. So to come back to that, as I read this, this text was presented to us on Thursday, and once the C46 was adopted, my interpretation was that if it's not amended, it would be $4 billion total. If it's adopted as such, that would be the case if the government does not amend it. I think that we'll be coordinating the two bills, and a decision will be taken soon on this to answer that question. Thank you very much. Now, in the last budget, there's important sums to support the green shift, the green transition. We talk about over 80 million in C47. We see about how the government is going to manage some of these sums by legislative change. They're going to create two institutions that are going to manage the sums that the government wants to invest in the green transition. So they're out of the control of the Parliament, and non-elected officers will be able to support or decide which projects to be supported without being accountable to anyone, without clear criteria. So we're very concerned about that. Do you have an answer on this to reassure us about this?
Just to clarify the question, is this in regards to the Canada Growth Fund or the Canada Innovation Corporation?
Les deux.
Both of them. We are concerned about the fact that most of the budget talks about certain sums that are going to go into these two institutions. So it goes outside of the budgetary framework. So decisions by non-elected means that they're no longer held accountable before the Parliament. Why are you acting in this way? And is there a technical reason which describes why the government has gone for this approach?
Of the Canada Innovation Corporation, and my colleague can speak to the Growth Fund. The approach was taken for a couple of reasons, and there are a number of measures to counterbalance this approach. And so in the first instance, laying out in legislation approved by Parliament the amount of funds that will be available was deemed to provide business with whom the corporation will interact a measure of stability, security, to understand that the government is here to provide this support and funding in the long term, which is deemed important for businesses who might take on multi-year research and development projects. So there are some counterbalancing measures in the legislation designed to limit the amount of funding that can go year to year in order to prevent an accumulation of funds. I mean, we think there's a lot of demand, and so we don't see that, but there is a limit to measure that. There's also an ability for the minister to withhold funds if ever there was deemed a reason to need to do that. So we believe that there's some counterbalances, and that the signal to business was an important feature.
Est-ce que Madame David voulait...
Thank you, Ms. David. Would you like to add something?
Oui, merci beaucoup pour la...
Yes, thank you for that question. So the government has set up the Canada Growth Fund, following on from Budget 2022, which announced its fund, and the financing of $15 billion. So in this Bill C47, the government is proposing that the BSP investment will actually manage these funds, and there have been several details given about the Canada Growth Fund that came out with the Economic Fall Statement in 2022, including a technical document which announces the investment to be made by the fund. and how they will proceed with these investments independently at arm's length from the government. So in this technical document, it gives several details about how the fund is going to be invested. And with these measures in C47, the government has named an existing corporation that has a high-level management team that's very experienced, that can make these investments quickly, and they will be held accountable to the Parliament through annual reports that Crown corporations will have to submit, such as the Canada Growth Fund.
And now we'll move to MP Blakey for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. So just carrying on, talking about the Growth Fund a little bit, one of the Budget 2023 commitments was to have 2 labor seats at the table for the governance of the Growth Fund. So that's obviously not here in this legislation, but I'm wondering, following passage of this legislation, what the process will be for standing up the Growth Fund governance, and when we might expect to see subsequent legislation delineating the governance of that special committee, or however exactly we want to define that, of the Public Sector Pension Investment Board.
Thank you for your question. So I think what you're referring to is the text of the budget 2022. So I'll add a bit of clarification here. The text of budget 2022 mentioned the 2 board seats for representatives nominated by bargaining agents. This is in respect of PSP Investments, the Crown Corporation that manages public sector pension plans. So that is where the board seats will be. That measure is expected to be consulted upon by the government this spring. So the government is intending to consult bargaining agents on this particular measure, with the measure to come out in a later bill, such as in a fall Budget Implementation Act.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for in terms of timing. One of the other questions that I wanted to ask is just in respect of, I'm just trying to find it here in the document. There are some extraordinary powers being conferred to the Minister of Finance in respect of the Canada Deposit Insurance Corporation and deposit insurance amounts, and I just want to confirm that those are that's a time-limited authority. I think the expiration date in the legislation is April 30th, 2024. So I'd just, if somebody wants to speak to why it is that government feels those authorities should be granted in this act, and the time-limited nature of those authorities.
Yes, the new authorities, the proposed authorities rather, are time limited. They're set to expire on April 30th, 2024. And they provide for the minister with Governor and Council approval, and on the consultation with the Governor of Bank of Canada, the President of CDIC, and the heads of OSFI, as well as the Finance Consumer Agency of Canada, to bring forward a temporary increase. So that authority is set to expire at the end of, or April, as I said, April 30th, 2024. The purpose of that is to really allow the minister and the government to bring forward a temporary measure under extreme circumstances, just to help promote financial stability and safeguard public confidence in the system.
And can you describe for the committee the kinds of circumstances that might trigger the use of this power?
I think that we would want to look to some international guidance on that. In the event that there is instability, concerns around potential bank runs, et cetera, as we saw in the U.S., the minister would be poised to be able to step in and bring forward a measure.
And have these kinds of authorities ever been granted to a Minister of Finance before? Are there any precedents for the use of this kind of measure?
Yes, there is a precedent in the early days of COVID. Under the legislation, the special emergency legislation, the minister was granted this power. It also had an expiry date, and it did expire and it was never used. And so additional governance around this measure is being proposed so that, for example, as I noted, it would be with governing council approval, consultation with the heads of those other financial sector agencies, and for the duration, should the minister bring forward a temporary increase, she would also be required to table a monthly report in Parliament in terms of the measure.
Okay, thank you very much. How's my time there, Mr. Chair?
So,
Sure. Maybe we could just have someone speak briefly to the changes to the criminal rate of interest, and particularly if there's a way to kind of distill that for Canadians who find themselves in the position of having to make use of payday loan services, what this will likely mean for them when they walk in the door, and what they can expect will change in terms of the nature and terms of the services.
Absolutely. Thank you for your question. So this measure...
apologize for interruption. I'll stop the time. Just if any of the witnesses, officials, when you join the table or at the table, or those even virtually, if you could just introduce yourself and kind of what department that you represent. Thanks.
Absolutely. So I'm the acting director of the Consumer Affairs team in the Financial Sector Policy Branch at the Department of Finance. And so this is one of the files that we work on. So Budget 23 announced two things, essentially. So first, lowering the criminal rate of interest to 35%, and to implement a cap on payday lending at $14 per $100. So upon implementation, the department would expect that Canadians would be able to access lower cost of credit loans, as well as lower payday loan costs.
Okay. Do you have a sense of what the differential would be for somebody who, say, is borrowing $100 every 2 weeks? What they currently would pay in interest on that, and what they would pay under the new
yes,
rules?
Absolutely. So provinces have different caps in place currently, and so they range from approximately $18 per $100 borrowed down to $14 per $100 borrowed in Newfoundland and Labrador. And so depending on which province they are in, they would save a few dollars per $100 borrowed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Blakey, and so members, witnesses, we are moving into our second round here, and we'll start with the Conservatives, and I have MP Morantz for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to ask a few questions about the arrangement with PSP Investments, the subsidiary of the PSP-IB. Your briefing notes say that the Canada Growth Fund will be paying for this service. Do you know how much PSP Investments will be charging for its investment management services to the Canada Growth Fund?
Thank you for your question. My name is Ann David. I'm a Senior Director in Crown Investment Asset Management. And PSP Investments, as you note, will be able to charge a fee to the Growth Fund. The intent is for it to operate on a cost recovery basis. So while we don't have dollar figures for that, the expectation is that PSP Investments will recover its cost from the Canada Growth Fund and not earn a profit on these services.
And was the PSP-IB selected for this through a request for proposals?
Thank you for your question. No, PSP was not selected through a request for proposals. Rather, the government looked at various entities and various mechanisms to stand up the Growth Fund, conducted some analysis, and discussed with entities such as PSP, and through mutual agreement ended up landing on PSP.
Because just on the Government of Canada's procurement website, it says that for departments acquiring services for contracts for services over $100,000, there's supposed to be an RFP. And now I recognize you're saying that it's cost recovery, but at the end of the day, and if you don't know how much it's going to be, how do you know whether or not you're required to go to an RFP?
Thank you for your question. I'm happy to take that back and provide more details on this.
Yeah, could you table that response with the committee?
Yes.
Okay. Now, were any other organizations considered to provide these services?
Yeah, so, as the government in leading up to Budget 2022 announced its intention to stand up a Canada Growth Fund, the government considered a number of ways to stand up the Growth Fund and a number of mechanisms, and considered other, existing organizations and whether it would fit in their mandate and the capacity to administer. And given PSP's expertise and the fact that it's a large investment fund that currently manages over $225 billion, PSP was selected as the investment manager for CGF.
Does PSP manage any venture capital funds? Do they have any experience managing venture capital?
Yes, PSP has a large and diversified portfolio, which includes venture investments.
Okay. And was the decision to use PSBIB at the departmental level, or was it at the political level?
So ultimately, decisions are made by the decision will be made by Parliament because the legislation has not passed yet.
Well, what I mean by that, was it a decision from the minister's office, or was it a decision of departmental officials to use PSBIB?
Thanks again for your question. So, departmental. Decisions in respect of the budget are, made by the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister, and ultimately are made by Parliament.
Now, you say that in your briefing notes that PSBIB has already seconded a team to help stand up the Canada Growth Fund, but what I'm concerned about is that the provisions that are required to change the enabling provisions for the Public Sector Pension Board Act have not been passed. They're under consideration in this legislation. They haven't gone through Parliament or the Senate and have not received royal assent. So how is it permissible then for PSBIB to be providing current services to help stand up Canada Growth Fund to make investments before the end of June, which is your stated goal?
Thanks again for those questions. So PSP has not yet seconded employees to CGF. It is currently negotiating with CGF an arrangement to second team members to CGF. So those in...
Because my time is limited, but your notes, which I read very carefully, said that a team has already been seconded. Is that not correct?
So a team will be seconded. They're currently working out the arrangements.
So why do the notes say that they have been?
And
could I just ask for a response on that in writing?
Sure, okay.
I'm confused about if the notes are inaccurate. Perhaps you could clarify that.
Thank you, MP Morantz, and if we could get those in writing. And then just as we go into our next questioner, MP Baker, members, witnesses, if you could just keep your earpiece far enough away from the mic because it is affecting the interpreters with their sound, and we want to make sure that they could do their work in a healthy and safe way. So we are on to MP Baker, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses who are here today and for all your service, all your work in preparing the BIA. I know it's a tremendous amount of work, but also your service to Canada on an ongoing basis. So I express my gratitude to you for all of that work. My first question is around Part 4, Division 5 of the bill, which would see the indefinite withdrawal of Russia and Belarus's most favored nation status, which results in the general tariff of 35% being applied to virtually all imports from those two countries. So in response to Russia's genocidal invasion of Ukraine, Canada was the first country to withdraw their most favored nation's status. Can you explain the rationale of making this withdrawal indefinite and tell us when the current revocation of that status is set to expire?
Bonjour. My name is Yannick Mondy. I'm the Director for Tariff and Trade Policy at the Department of Finance. I'll be taking this question. Thank you for your question. With respect to the end part of the question as to when the current OIC is set to expire, it is set under the customs tariff that it would normally expire 180 days after it's coming into effect, which was October 8. And unfortunately, like based on the current parliamentary schedule, this date would not be on a sitting day. It needs to be on a sitting day, and then otherwise it gets extended by another 15 sitting days, which basically right now, based on current parliamentary committee schedule, puts us at the beginning of May, I believe May 5th or May 8th, so I can provide this in writing if necessary. I'm with respect to this is why actually this was drafted for Division 5 to have a retroactive effect to the end of this particular date. I don't know if I fully answered the member's question, though.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's helpful. I think the other part of the question was just what's the rationale of making the withdrawal indefinite?
Yes, this is to reflect the enduring nature of the conflict, and also to ensure that there's given that the tariff and those parts of the tariff would be, it's by deference to the legislative to be able to ensure that Parliament approves a permanent withdrawal of this of the MFN, of the most favored nation tariff treatment for these countries, and this can be reconsidered for reestablishment at a future date, but this is lined up with the enduring nature of the conflict.
Okay. And is what I said correct, that it imposes a general tariff of 35% to imports from those two countries? Is that correct?
Yes, this is virtually to all good. There are not all imports are subject to the 35%. There are, by legislation, few exemptions that under the general tariff, which is the default tariff which applies when you withdraw most favored nation tariff treatment. So there are some exceptions. For example, goods that have already an MFN rate that is well above 35% would retain those higher rates. For examples would be goods that are subject to Canada's supply managed system, for example. There are as well other exclusions that retain an MFN rate. Periodicals would be one example, and certain works of art.
Okay. So, but effectively, this is designed to make sure that we're, in part at least, it's designed to ensure that we're imposing greater costs on Russia and Belarus, economic costs for their role in further invading Ukraine.
That is correct. It is to incite importers to diversify and source away from these countries.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Chair, how much time do I have?
About a minute, MP Baker.
Minute. So quickly, Division 1 of Part 4 would see the government put in place a single nonprofit external complaints body for banks. And I just wonder, for the folks at home who aren't familiar with this, what's the problem that the government is trying to address with this measure or proposal?
Thank you for your question. So consumer groups have made several recommendations and suggestions in terms of how to improve the external complaints handling system. And so some of the changes that are being proposed here is to provide the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, the Commissioner of the FCAC, with more oversight over the external complaints body system, as well as improving the sort of the policies and procedures at these external complaint bodies that will be subject to the Commissioner's approval.
Baker, and now to MP Samari for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Peter. I've got a question on the change to the Canadian Act on the Protection of the Environment, the CEPA. It seems it's a step backwards so that oil companies can take time before they turn to climate change. And I'll explain what I mean. The carbon tax for big emitters is available in the provinces where it applies. But if the oil companies don't come up with any green projects, they lose this money at the end of the year. And in C47, it's inviting them to take all their time. If this bill is adopted, these sums will be put aside for future use. So that means the petrol companies will not need to draw up a project within the year. So I'd like to have confirmation on this. And recall that if the municipalities don't use lose money for infrastructure in the year, they lose it. But this wouldn't be the case anymore for the oil companies vis-à-vis the carbon tax. So could you confirm that?
Donc, il n'y a
There's no one here to answer that question today, but we've taken note of that. I think we can transfer it to somebody else within the department. So if you could do that follow-up, and so we could get a written answer to confirm that, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you. Now, I'd like to come back to the question about the Canada Deposit Insurance Act and Division 37. We understand that this is because of bankruptcies or problems with U.S. and Swiss banks and the Silicon Valley Bank. We know that deposit insurance is 250 million. Here it's 100,000, and this has been increased. Here, there's been a study carried out, but at the beginning of COVID, we increased the ceiling, but here we're going to allow it to be increased once again. Does that not mean that the 100,000 was insufficient? Because each time there's a financial crisis, it seems that we have to have a temporary act to actually increase that ceiling further.
Thank you for your question. So this legislation allows the minister to increase the deposit insurance limit, which remains at $100,000 per deposit across the 9 different categories of deposits. It is temporary. It is to be used only in exceptional and sort of emergency situations. And you know, the thinking is that given the current situation and the banking turmoil that we saw in the U.S. And in Switzerland, it was a prudent thing to do. As you've pointed out, there was a legislative provision in the early days of COVID through the emergency legislation that Parliament passed that gave the minister that authority as well, and that expired without having been used. So the $100,000 limit, sorry, bear with me. I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Rachel Grasham, and I'm acting today, so excuse me for not having all the facts right at my fingertips. But I understand that this has been reviewed, this limit, and the decision was to maintain it at $100,000. And so, as I noted, it really is under temporary. Okay, enough. Thank you.
Time,
okay.
but thank you for that. Yeah, MP, somebody?
So, if you have additional elements, you could send these in to us in writing, please. And you've got your flashlight on your phone, please, opposite.
We are now on the fly. We're not, yeah, okay. And over to MP Blakey for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. My question is about Division 6 of Part 4, and this is the section that would allow despite sections 27 and 27.1 of the Bank of Canada Act, any of its ascertained surplus to its retained earnings until its retained earnings are equal to zero. I just want to confirm my understanding of this is that this isn't an ongoing authority for the Bank of Canada to be able to apply its retained earnings against losses. It's a time-limited authority, again, in a manner of speaking, to be able to offset the losses that it has already incurred as a result of the increase in interest rate and the bonds buying and selling that it did during the pandemic in order to be able to finance the Government of Canada's income support programs, among other things. So when those liabilities are covered, or that difference on its asset sheet is made up, there's no ongoing authority for it to be able to do this. It's just like a one-off. So if someone could speak to how we got to where we are, how this is a solution to that, and only that, as opposed to an ongoing authority, I think that would be helpful for the committee.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, my name is Gloria Wong. I'm a director at the Department of Finance. Yes, the measure in respect to Section 27 of the Bank of Canada Act is meant to be temporary. There is no long-term obligation for the government. The provision will expire once the Bank of Canada returns to positive equity or all the losses associated with GBPP are covered.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's it for me for this round.
Thank you, MP Blakey and Ms. Wong. And now we are going to MP Morantz for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, just continuing on about PSP investments, I just want to clear up a few things. You said that PSP management does have experience in venture capital. I didn't spend a lot of time looking, but I couldn't find any evidence of that. I'm wondering if you could table with the committee that information. And the reason I'm asking is this. On the PSBIB's website, it does say that it's PSP Investments' statutory mandate is to invest its assets with a view to achieving a maximum rate of return without undue risk of loss. The technical backgrounder for the Canada Growth Fund says that risks the Canada Growth Fund will mitigate: demand risk, policy risk, regulatory risk, execution risk. These risks, separately or in combination, are limiting the deployment and scaling of private investment because of the uncertainty they create about an investment's longer-term financial prospects. The Canada Growth Fund will invest in a manner that accepts some portion of these risks, which is more akin to a venture capital fund. So I'm just unclear as to where the expertise lies. I don't question the expertise of the PSPIB as a pension fund manager. What I am wondering about is why they've now seconded a team, or will be seconding a team, to provide advice on what is essentially a much more riskier endeavor, which is to mitigate the risk for private enterprise for new startups or other types of businesses or technologies. So I don't expect you to answer that here, but if you could think about that and come back with an explanation, I think that would be very helpful for the committee. Now, on the Bank of Canada, I just want to follow up on what Mr. Blakey was talking about. Your briefing note said that the losses that the bank has incurred because of their quantitative easing program, in other words, the fact that they're now paying more interest on settlement proceeds than they were receiving on the bonds that they purchased, would have virtually no impact on the government's budgetary balance, which I thought was an interesting choice of words. It wasn't no impact. It was virtually no impact. Now, when we had the bank governor and the deputy here, they said that they were, in the good times, they were paying about $1 billion a year. That doesn't fit in my mind with the words virtually no impact. Now, you said that, well, it's virtually no impact because, well, there'll be, the government will have to pay the interest on the additional debt it incurs. But the fact of the matter is that there is at least $1 billion in revenue that the government is not receiving. So why would you say that has virtually no impact on the government's bottom line? And my second part of the question is, how long will this go on for, and what will the total amount of the cost to the government treasury be of this action?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So in response to the budgetary impact of the section of Section 27 of Bank of Canada Act, you are correct that there is a cash flow issue. However, because the Bank of Canada is a government crown corporation, its account is consolidated with that of the Public Accounts of Canada. So the fact that the measure itself has no impact on the government, but you are absolutely correct that the profits or the losses or earnings of the Bank of Canada has the direct fiscal impact of the government. But I guess the information you have in front of you simply applies to the fact that the measure itself has no incremental fiscal impact on the government.
So now I'm really confused because you're saying it has an impact and it doesn't have an impact. Maybe I'm missing something. Which is it? The government is out about $1 billion a year, is it not?
So the fact that the bank's income or losses will affect the budgetary balance, but the fact that we're allowing the bank to withhold its remittances will not. Because, for example, if the bank earns an extra $1 billion this year, it will be an extra $1 billion in the budgetary balance. If it loses $1 billion a year, it will be $1 billion less. However, whether the bank gets to hold the remittances, for example, if it earns $1 billion and it gets to hold the remittances, it does not impact the balance because the extra $1 billion is already booked in the fiscal framework. It already affects the budgetary balance, regardless of whether the cash flows back to the government.
Okay, maybe, do I have any? Okay, will the government deficit be higher because the Bank of Canada isn't remitting its profits as it normally has?
It will not, because only the net losses or income of the Bank of Canada is consolidated with the Government of Canada's budgetary balance.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Morantz. And now to MP Zerowitz for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all of our witnesses for supporting us today. I'm going to continue on the track of the Canadian Innovation Corporation. I do think that there's a lot more we can do to support business investment, Canadian innovators, scaling up, commercialization, a lot more, particularly in a world that is increasingly intangible assets versus tangible assets. So I know that three core functions of the Canadian Innovation Corporation is the foresight and experimentation, provision of advisory services, and delivery of funding support programming. How is the agency differing from the supports that we have right now? So what's the value add that it's providing?
Thanks very much for the question. So once again, it's Greg Reed. I'm a Director General in the Department of Finance. So, you're quite right. There's a number of programs across the government that work with businesses to promote, as you talked about, some of those features. What's new and different and will be built on in the Canada Innovation Corporation in respect to those three functions. So, for example, in allocating the financial support, there will be built a roster of technical experts in respect of the different types of research and development. So we learned from international examples, in particular in Israel, that allocation of funding based on this technical expertise is really valuable to understand that there's a good possibility that the outcomes of that research and development will appear in the economy. In other words, there will be marketable products and services both domestically and internationally. So we're going to really focus on that technical expertise, or the corporation will focus. In terms of advisory, for example, the Industrial Research Assistance Program and their technology advisors are the gold standard within Canada in terms of helping companies and providing this advice. We'll build on that advice more systematically, and you mentioned intellectual property. So in the past couple of years, across government, there's been a number of attempts to promote, raise awareness in terms of the importance of the creation and then retention of intellectual property in Canada. This will be a core function of the advisory services that are provided by the agency, in addition to supporting companies develop their project proposals, refine their project proposals, and carry out those proposals. And the foresighting and experimentation, this is something quite new, especially on the experimentation. One of the reasons why the corporation is structured as it is to provide the board of directors of the corporation the ability to quickly adapt and modify its programming and its offerings, advisory offerings, even to businesses, in respect of the feedback that they receive, not only from program evaluations and understanding the outcomes that businesses are achieving, but also, and this is the foresetting part, by building a strategy team that becomes experts, or that are experts, in monitoring and understanding industrial and economic trends, both domestically and internationally. So the corporation will understand where the puck's going and can help direct how they understand their funding applications and where is it best to allocate funding from the corporation.
Okay, so I'm glad we're bringing in the expertise we need in each of these areas, and we're building up the capacity that we need, which is great. We have the Clean Tech Patent Collective, which basically does all of what you have, other than the Foresight one. Is that going to come under the Canadian Innovation Corporation, or is that separate? Because the Clean Tech Innovation, the Clean Tech Patent Collective, it's basically helping smaller organizations to patent, to basically build up their own capacity as well in terms of the supply chain sort of moving forward. So does it come under this?
There's nothing in the legislation that either prevents that from happening, but nor is there a plan currently for it to come under the Canada Innovation Corporation. It was acknowledged in the blueprint document, if you've had a chance to review, that as the corporation learns and understands what it can best offer and support companies in terms of IP retention and protection, that might be an activity that it may either partner with existing patent collectives or create its own at some point in the future.
And how much funding is offered and over how many years?
So laid out in the legislation, you'll see there's a path of funding. It gets up to $820 25, I believe, and then it levels off at 525 million.
Okay. And I think part of what it's trying to do is solve the problem of low business investment, which is external. So there's Canadian innovators, small, medium-sized companies, but there's also huge companies that actually don't invest in business or don't do enough business investment. Is there anything there that supports them?
Well, I guess just a precision first that it's business expenditures in research and development. So it's very focused on research and development projects, not on investment in capital. So, for example, not capital adoption, but rather research and development, which can include technological adaptation. So the corporation could support a known off-the-shelf technology to be applied in a new way, but it has to be creating new knowledge, new products, new processes, new services. And then you're right, currently, for example, the Industrial Research Assistance Program is an SME program. The CIC will not just focus on SMEs. In fact, one of the things we learned is that bridging between the large Canadian industrials and the SMEs can be a really powerful way in which we promote research and development and expenditures on that. So there is no limitation to just support SMEs, but there's also there's an understanding that there's value in bringing those two groups together, the small and the large corporations, especially in respect of procurement.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Zarowitz and members, witnesses. We are moving to the third round. We're starting this round with someone who had been a longtime member of this committee. MP Fast is with us, and you're going to have 5 minutes. But I also want to recognize joining us is MP Davidson. Welcome to the committee, MP Davidson. Yes, yeah.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
Soup and Salad Bowl of Canada is on scene.
There you go. So, okay, we've got MP Fast for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you for that warm welcome, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to a question that was broached by my colleague, Mr. Chambers. It has to do with money laundering. You're all familiar with the Cullen Commission and its recommendations, some 100 recommendations, and it recommended that the safe harbor provisions for information sharing be extended to include money laundering. That was echoed in an earlier report from this committee in a previous parliament. Why has that not happened?
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to answer that question. And as we spoke, there are several provisions in the bill that speak to information sharing, but those are focused within the government institutions. The safe harbor provision would apply to private information sharing. The government in the budget announced the launch of the next parliamentary review, which should be launched this year. And as part of that review, we're preparing a consultation document to look at many of the areas with respect to how we can make improvements to the regime. And this is one of the areas where we feel that consultation will be warranted and merited, and we look forward to learning more about how we might be able to look at this issue in more depth.
Could I strongly recommend that you actually move forward with implementing that expansion of safe harbor provisions, because this issue has been thoroughly canvassed under the Cullen Commission. It was thoroughly canvassed by a previous committee of the previous parliament. There's a second part to that, another recommendation from the Cullen Commission. That was that the federal government implement a formal keep open regime for financial institutions in which they can, at the request of law enforcement, keep the account open for the purposes of enforcement investigation. Has that happened?
So that has not happened, but that too is an issue that the government is looking at and is exploring as part of the parliamentary review, and should be part of the consultation document. The government in the budget 2023 did commit to addressing all of the Cullen Commission recommendations that pertain to the federal government and the federal regime. Obviously, the Cullen Commission is not able to make direct recommendations to the federal government because it is a provincial commission.
That's why I'm here.
But we certainly have recognized those and are committed to addressing and looking at all of those issues.
All right, the sooner the better. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to now address a question relating to Division 33 of Part 4, which would be threats of foreign interference. Foreign interference is a very live issue in Canada today. So my question, first of all, I would ask you, sir, to perhaps just give us a very brief, maybe a minute, a summary of the steps that have been taken in Budget 2023 to address foreign interference.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. My name is Manuel Dussault. I'm Acting Director General for the Financial Institutions Division. A very quick overview. So first, OSFI's financial sector oversight will be expanded by expanding its mandate to include supervising financial institutions in order to determine whether they have adequate policies and procedures to protect themselves against threat to their integrity and security. And second, the proposal is to enhance the superintendent and the minister's authorities in regard to security and integrity with respect to supervision, ownership, approvals, and taking control of institutions for national security reasons.
Okay, if the superintendent of financial institutions were to take over a financial institution due to national security concerns, what criteria would be applied by the superintendent to determine whether the financial institution should remain in operation or whether it should be immediately closed down?
So thank you, Chair, for the question.
Yeah, and a short answer, please.
All right, the criteria are in the legislation. So they include where the integrity and security of the financial institution is at risk, where all shareholders have been precluded from exercising their voting rights, or where there are national security risks.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Fast. And now over to the Liberals, MP MacDonald for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to, I believe it was Ms. Wong on the Bank of Canada's remittance issue.
To the table. Have the time.
I want to, we've had several narrative surrounding this issue, and I just wanted to be clear that it does not affect the fiscal behavior of government's budget. Is that correct? Is that a fair statement?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it is a fair statement.
Thank you. I just wanted that on the record. The Canada Growth Fund. You guys need more chairs down there. Thank you, Ms. David. We talked a little bit about the investment in the Canada Growth Fund and how important it is for the competitiveness of this country. But can you remind the committee of the objectives of the Growth Fund and how they will be, how these amendments will help expedite its launch? So how does your department help to expedite this process for the Canada Growth Fund?
Thank you very much for the question. So as you pointed out, Budget 22 announced a Canada Growth Fund in order to catalyze private investments in Canada's clean economy. So what the Growth Fund will do is invest in a way that absorbs risks in order to encourage private sector investment in new technologies as well as SMEs and various other supply chains in order to grow Canada's economy at the speed and scale to meet net zero. And so the reason for selecting PSP investments in order to manage the Growth Fund is exactly that, to speed up the implementation of the Growth Fund. We don't want the Growth Fund to be slow to start. We want it to be in a position to invest in the first half of 2023, as was indicated in the 2022 Fall Economic Statement. And so the reason to select an experienced and expert investment team was exactly to have the Growth Fund operational in the first half of 2023 so it can quickly start investing in order to meet Canada's climate and other economic goals.
Thank you so much. I'm going to jump to equalization formula, and I don't know who to direct that, but maybe we'll do musical chairs again. Yes, we will. 3 for 3. I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. I come from the smallest province in Canada, so equalization is extremely important to me. So that's why I'm just asking, first of all, can you brief us on some of the minor technical changes that were implemented in the BIA?
Yes, so I'm Suzanne Kennedy, Senior Director of Equalization and Territorial Formula Financing Policy. In BIA, there are 2 changes concerning equalization. One is to extend the authority to make payments. The authority to make payments is reviewed every 5 years, and it expires March 31st, 2024. So it will extend that for another 5 years. And the government announced in Budget 2023 it would make also technical changes following consultations with provinces and territories. Those are mainly made in regulations, or they will be mainly brought forward through the standard regulatory process. There is one change in BIA. This is concerning miscellaneous revenues. So right now, miscellaneous revenues are grouped with property taxes for the purposes of equalization. The proposal is to distribute them across all the relevant non-resource revenue sources. So that's personal income taxes, business income taxes, consumption taxes, and property taxes for the purpose of equalization.
So the miscellaneous revenues can be incorporated into to any one of those items that you're talking about, or is it going to be a separate entity? I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if the miscellaneous revenues, are they something that governments are not accountable for to the extent of those items at the tax basis that you're talking about?
So right now, for calculating fiscal capacity in respect of miscellaneous revenues, it's assumed that they're related to property taxes. So they're just measured on that basis. After study of the issue, there's evidence that they're related to a number of the bases. So it's inappropriate to equalize them only on the property tax base. So the change would distribute them across the relevant non-resource bases.
Okay, thank you.
McDonald, and we did stop
give me
time.
extra
We did
time
stop
for all
time for when, to allow witnesses to come to the table. So we're off to MP Samari now for 2.5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'd like to continue to put questions to Ms. Kennedy to limit the musical chairs activities amongst the public servants. Could you please explain to us what it means in the amendment to include the non-indexation of provincial personal income tax systems and determining fiscal stabilization payments in order to increase transparency? And what exactly does this mean, please?
Oui, merci pour la question.
Thank you for that question. Well, currently, we just capture the amounts that are remitted from these companies. They're in the fiscal capacity measures related to natural resources, so we don't capture, for the moment, the portion which is not remitted from the net revenue of these companies. So the proposal that's been developed in consultation with the provinces and territories is, in fact, that for this portion, which is an unremitted portion, because it's not all companies that produce hydroelectricity that always remit the same portion of their net revenue to the provincial government. So we're going to take this an unremitted portion and actually deal with it as part of the tax basis of corporate taxation. Thank you very much for that. So if the bill goes ahead, it will be for the payments for 2024 and 2025 that will enter into force. But if we look at these amendments and if we apply them to 2023, 2024, the changes for payments for provinces would mean that it would go down for Quebec and go up for Manitoba. Would that be the case? Would there not be any impact, for example, for PEI or for the Maritimes? Yes, we've indicated the biggest drop and the biggest increase. So yes, there would be changes. So if you could please provide us with the list for all the changes for all provinces in writing, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. And thank you, MP Saint-Marie, MP Blakey.
2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to come back to Division 8. I guess I'm frankly surprised that there aren't any coordinating amendments, given that C46 was tabled well prior to C47. Wondering what was the thought process there, or the decision-making process around not including coordinating amendments for, in the event that C46 were to pass expeditiously?
It's a very good question. This is obviously like the government decided to provide table bill expeditiously for those two things that are in Bill C46, and then, as you know, included the very same provisions in Bill C47. The government will have to determine, based on which one passes first, how they will determine which one will take effect. So if C46 does get royal assent before C47 will need to be adjusted accordingly to reflect that.
Is there normally a review process in the department where the same measure is being included in two pieces of legislation to try and capture that and ensure that there's some coordination included in the bills when they're tabled, or is it normal that we would do this retroactively?
This is interesting in the sense that this is not the first time I've seen where measures have been tabled in a separate bill and then were folded into a budget implementation bill. But then in the past, that separate bill never, like the government just never moved forward with that, bringing it forward through the House and seeking royal assent. What's happened here is that there's been agreement, as I understand, to expedite passage of C46. So I think that may not have been part of the thinking or what contemplated at the time. So it's a bit not in my realm to determine exactly how the government will proceed, but the government will have an intention, I think, to come back to probably this committee with a plan forward as to how to coordinate the two bills.
Okay, and has this been flagged as a learning in the department for when this kind of situation arises in the future, that it may behoove government to include coordinating amendments in their Budget Implementation Act?
I think this is a note that we will take back, yes, for certain.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MP Blakey. And now we're to MP Chambers for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I do have some additional questions on the Bank of Canada, but so we'll, as we're waiting for our official to arrive, I'll ask a general question. And I think, Mr. Countryman, you were designated the tribute if you watch the Hunger Games. I don't know if you get that reference, but anyway. What's the additional operational costs in people that the government will incur for the provisions we have in front of us?
That, I'm afraid, I don't have a question for you.
Fair enough. And I was expecting that answer because we asked last year and we never got an answer, and which is why, Mr. Chair and Mr. Clerk, that I have asked that Treasury Board officials be included as part of the pre-budget study. The Parliamentary Budget Officer and the Auditor General have raised concerns about people planning processes across government, and every year that there's a budget tabled and every year that is asked, what's the impact on people? We don't actually have an answer, and we don't have anyone from Treasury Board who's capable of answering that question to come to committee. So that's the reason why I'm asking for those officials to appear. Ms. Wong, thank you for your earlier discussions with my colleagues. I understand the accounting, but what I'm actually interested in is a very simple issue of kind of cash. Where does the Bank of Canada get the money to satisfy the losses that it's incurred? Does it just create additional settlement balances and kind of pay those or put those in the accounts of the banks for which they owe, to whom they owe the funds?
Thank you for the question. So during normal times, the Bank of Canada makes profit by Sinaraj by printing money. So currently, the Bank of Canada is suffering losses due to what you refer to losses due to settlement GBPP activities that they conduct during the pandemic. So currently, the Bank of Canada, the Sinaraj that they make is not sufficient to cover the losses that they're incurring. So going forward, the intent of the measures...
I know the intent of the measure. I'm just curious as to, they don't have enough money to pay for the balance that they owe the financial institution, correct? Right, they're running a loss. They've run out of money, right? I'm asking, where does the money come from that they pay to whom they owe the debt?
Good question.
I think it's more of a technical question, so I'm just curious.
I'm sorry, I do not have the information on that, but I will get back to
Yeah,
you
it's just more of like, do they create additional money and put it in the bank? It's like digital settlement balance. They just kind of chalk it up and erase with an eraser and put in more. I'm just curious as to where the money actually comes from in order to cover that shortfall.
Taxpayer.
Well, ultimately, it ends up being borne by the taxpayer, indeed. And also, when you consolidate, it all goes to the taxpayer. But if one is analyzing what the impact of interest rates are on the government deficit, would you agree that you have to include the net actuarial losses and not just look at the cost of borrowing for government?
So the impact does have an impact on cash flows. So therefore, the government would have a higher interest payments. Yes,
correct. So the government has higher interest payments, almost double than what it was a couple of years ago, $23 billion to $43 billion next year. But that does not include the net actuarial losses that the bank is incurring as a result of higher interest rates. Is that a fair interpretation?
I'm afraid I do not have the answer to
that
question.
That's quite all right. It wasn't my intention to ask a very technical question, but since it was brought up earlier, just quickly on the Canada Innovation Corporation, are there any protections or directions with respect to investments in rural Canada outside of central municipal or metropolitan areas?
Thanks for the question. Greg Reed from the Department of Finance. Within the legislation, there's no prescription of exactly where or for what funding will flow. In fact, it says that it will flow to all sectors and all regions, which really just provides the opportunity for the corporation to operate in all sectors and all regions with that intent. So as programs are designed and further information flows out, there'll be additional information in that respect.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Thank you, Ms. Wong.
Thank you, MP Chambers. And we'll still have to find out about that Hunger Games comment, for those that don't watch Hunger Games, on Mr. Countryman. And now we're off to MP Chattel for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. As you will notice, Ms. Hunt, there's a great deal of interest in this committee to reinforce our legislation on the proceeds of crime, terrorist financing, and so on. And the committee has recommended on 2 occasions that we should have the register in force. Now, I know that you've mentioned that you're working very hard to make progress on that. Would it be possible to respond to us in writing to know exactly what's still missing in order to reach our standards and what's making it difficult? What are the obstacles so that we can better understand this and better assist you in your work? That would be very much appreciated. Perfect. And I'd like to come back to the Canada Growth Fund now, because I'd like to understand the nature of these projects that we're going to try and finance together with the private sector. Could you give us some tangible examples of different sectors? What are you expecting? Thank you for that question. So the growth fund is going to be flexible to invest in different types of projects, companies, and technologies. For example, it could be decarbonization projects for industrial companies, for example, in the cement industry, steel, or it could be companies that are developing green technologies. For example, a company that's manufacturing net zero emission buses or other investments of this type. Or it could also be in the supply chains, of low carbon supply chains. For example, when it comes to the critical minerals sector, where there could be funding to help with the making of batteries. Now, in another context, we've talked a great deal about sustainable finance or green finance. There's a great deal of work underway with the International Sustainable Standard Board on the taxonomy side of things. I know that's not directly related to this issue, but how do you choose the best projects that will lead us towards net zero carbon neutrality and that actually meet these sustainable objectives? Because I've observed that taxonomy is missing from the budget, unfortunately, even though the European Commission, for example, is moving quickly ahead on this, as are other countries, and it seems that we are in a wait-and-see mode. It would be important to have certain standards and adopt these standards so that we can correctly select our projects. So is taxonomy going to be taken into account when it comes to selecting better projects? Thank you for that question. We can refer that specific question on taxonomy to colleagues because there's colleagues in our department that are responsible for that particular sector. Then when it comes to the growth fund itself, it's going to turn to international high-class standards in terms of investments, and will report back to the public on certain investment criteria and report on the results to show how the fund has actually attained these results and what were the criteria on which they based themselves. So just to clarify, we're going to rely on international standards, but there's certain people within the finance department who are working on developing standards for Canada specifically in terms of what would constitute a project that will lead us towards net zero? Yes, in fact, we do have colleagues that are specifically working on that taxonomic issue, and we can come back with an answer. Yes, it would be great to see the progress being made within the department on taxonomy. That's a subject that's very much of interest in the motion that we are studying on green or sustainable finance. So you'll see there is a link there. If there's still some time, I'll pass on my 20 seconds to other colleagues who might need it to round off their own line of questioning. Thank you. Thank you, MP Chatel.
Members, witnesses, we're moving into round 4, and this will be our last round of questions. And so we're starting off with MP Fast. That's what I've got for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I believe most of us, if not all of us around this table, would acknowledge that government doesn't always get investment decisions right. Medicago, Kent Sino come to mind. Federal government often fails in its investment decisions. So you'll understand why we on this side of the table are concerned that growth funds that are established by the government be properly managed by the individuals that can actually make the right decisions. And I note that the Canada Growth Fund, its mandate is to actually absorb risks, and that it's your own testimony. So this is a little different than investing for conventional pension purposes, and yet the PSBIB is the organization that you're drawing on to help make the investments for the CGF. Just wondering, why did you not cast your net more broadly as you were searching for a fund manager?
Thank you very much for the question. So in terms of selecting a fund manager, and as previously indicated, the government's intent was to stand up the growth fund quickly in order so that it can start making the investments to achieve net zero at the speed and scale required. In selecting PSP investments, the government considered an experienced and independent fund manager that is currently owned by the government, and so that was those were some of the criteria. In addition, an investment fund manager that has already experienced investment teams, and so that we could quickly stand up a team in order to invest the growth fund. So just in terms of the distinction between the pension management mandate and the growth fund management mandate, those will be two very separate mandates. Obviously, the PSP will be able to provide some economies of scale by already having investments teams, so being able to quickly staff up an investment team for the growth fund, but the assets of the growth fund will be managed separately. It will be a separate portfolio with a separate financial mandate to achieve the growth fund's financial objectives and recover its capital, whereas PSP will continue to invest the pension funds with the mandate to maximize returns without undue risk of loss.
Did I hear you correctly say that it was the ability to set up the CGF quickly that drove your decision to go with the PSPIB?
Correct. It was the desire to quickly have an expert investment team ready to make investments in the near term.
Right, but these are much higher risk investments. In fact, by definition, this is about the absorption of risk by government to enable and catalyze green innovation in Canada, correct?
That's correct.
Did you also say that the fund manager had to be owned by the government?
I'm saying that one of the benefits of selecting PSP is that it was an existing investment fund that is owned by the government.
Okay, so if those are the two criteria, setting it up quickly and it has to be owned by the government, that severely limits your ability to bring in expertise to get these investment decisions right.
Thank you very much for that. As previously indicated, PSP is one of the largest pension investment managers in Canada and has expert investment teams, and therefore that was a significant driver to the decision to select PSP to manage the growth fund.
But the CGF is not a pension fund, correct?
Correct. The CGF is an investment fund.
A higher risk investment fund.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Listen, I also wanted to just ask a question about the recent high-profile bank failures in the United States and in Europe. The budget does try to address that, including giving the minister extended power in terms of addressing the coverage under the deposit insurance regime. Can you tell me what are examples of circumstances where the Minister of Finance would use her authority to increase the deposit insurance limit?
Thank you for your question. I think, as I noted, it is a temporary measure. I would sort of say that our system is very strong, very resilient. It's well capitalized. It's very well regulated. But given the circumstances in the U.S., there's always that concern around contagion in the financial sector. Our financial institutions are global in scope. And
so my question was, what?
MP fast. Yeah, we're well over time.
All right.
So now we are going to MP Baker, please, for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to just go back briefly to the Bank of Canada. We were talking earlier about the Bank of Canada and the measures here touching on the Bank of Canada's retained earnings. I understand that there are a number of other central banks around the world that are in similar positions to the Bank of Canada, because what happened to the Bank of Canada in terms of running deficits or losses is a function of global forces and actions by the Bank of Canada, and those same global forces and similar actions were taken by other countries. So other banks, other central banks, are in a very similar position to the Bank of Canada as a result. So can I ask you to explain if there are other countries taking the approach that we are with respect to this issue?
Thank you for the question. Yes, indeed, our measure is very similar to the one taken by Australia. So in Australia, the treasurer there has secured the support, or the governor of the Reserve Bank of Australia has secured the support of the treasurer to allow them to also retain profits going forward to offset their losses associated with quantitative easing.
Okay, thank you very much. So would you say that that's a similar approach?
It is a similar approach.
Okay, thank you very much. There are a lot of Canadians who are struggling with living, and frankly, who are having these challenges exacerbated by predatory lenders. So I'm really pleased to see the government's taking strong action on this file by reducing the criminal rate of interest from 60% to 35% and capping charges that payday lenders can place on Canadians. Like, I think this is going to make a huge difference for some folks who are really struggling with the cost of living, who are very vulnerable. And I understand also that the government is launching consultations on lowering the criminal rate of interest even further through budget 2023. So could I ask one of you to comment on who is most likely to benefit from these changes to the criminal rate of interest?
Thank you for the question. Again, this is Mark Radley, Acting Director of the Consumer Affairs team at the Department of Finance. So some survey data by the...
Move back or move your earpiece away from the mic. Just we're getting some feedback here, and the interpreters, it affects them. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So according to some survey data by the FCAC,
Sorry, it's happening again, so I don't know if you could just... It's a cell phone, maybe? A cell phone you have on, or I don't know, some device. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Third's a charm,
Is that,
I hope.
is that better now?
Okay, yes.
I hope.
think
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So according to some FCAC survey data, they found that typically there's overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples, newcomers to Canada, people in the lower income quartiles that use high-cost loans and payday lending the most. So we would expect that these groups would be the ones to benefit the most from this measure.
Okay. And can you just talk about what the impact would have? What would the impact be on them of this measure in their daily lives and their cost of living?
Absolutely. So in the budget 23, we illustrated an example. And so we talked about an individual named Hannah who took out a $5,000 loan with a 2-year amortization period, so paying it back over 2 years. And at the new rate, compared to what the current rate is, to lowering to 35%, Hannah will have saved $775 over the course of the loan. I spoke a little bit earlier about the impact on payday lending, and that really depends on the province on which the individual lives.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, previously I was a member of the provincial parliament in Ontario, and I was at the time parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Finance, and we did a whole bunch of work at the time on behalf of the government of Ontario when it comes to this issue. And I became keenly aware through that the degree to which this impacts people who are most vulnerable across our country, frankly, because of the amounts of interest that they pay. So I'm really glad to see that we've taken the steps we have, and I hope that we can go further, because I think this is going to offer a major relief to folks who are already vulnerable and need that support. So thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MP Baker. And now to MP Samari, please, for 2.5+ minutes. Yeah.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. My next question on C208 on family transfer of businesses. We know that this came from the opposition to stop penalising family transfers of businesses because otherwise it was going to be more profitable to sell to a foreigner rather than to family members. This has been given royal assent, but the government refused to implement it. The committee, under the chairmanship of Wayne Easter back then, was called back during the summer to ask the government to implement this. The government said, OK, we'll implement this. But in Quebec, many family farms and family farm businesses are still waiting to make this transfer because we're waiting for this to trickle down from the CRA to accountants know how to proceed. They've been waiting that for 2 years. In the in-camera session, when we had a budget presentation in the proposed legislation, there seemed to be this new act that would replace this, which would mean that finally we'd be able to carry out these transfers. I was very surprised when I've seen that in C47 in these hundreds of pages, this is still not in there. Now, of course, I don't want to put questions about political choices. That's the finance minister will have to answer that when she comes to the committee. I'll be able to put this question to you. But I'd like to know whether there's a technical reason, which means that for 2 years now we've been waiting since we had the royal assent, and the government said that they would implement this legislation. But when we looked at the budgetary documents, we saw that this bill is ready, but it's still not in there. Are there technical reasons which explain that this has not been included in Bill C-47? Once again, I cannot answer that question. It would be for my colleagues dealing with tax policy side of things, but I've taken note of that, and I'll try and get an answer for you. Thank you very much for that. Now, another question on EI, employment insurance. There's certain proposed measures in C-47, but there's not the main one in there, I think. We are asking that, in fact, during the pandemic, there were lots of different deficits, and the government stepped in. Now we're asking that the deficit from the EI fund should be covered by the government. It shouldn't be workers that have to pay for that through their contributions. But with the bill, it's saying that there needs to be a balance there. So given that we don't have that act in C-47, we understand that the government is choosing that the deficit of the EI fund should be paid for by contributors, namely workers. Once again, that is not my area of expertise, but I've taken note of that question as well. Thank you. And then a third technical question on dental care. In C-47, there's a more specific point included to make sure that people who are covered by private insurance, group insurance, unionized workers would actually be excluded from the dental care program. So in dental care in C-47, we're saying unionized workers. We want to make sure that you do not have access to this dental care plan. Is that correct? Once again, same answer. I'm not a specialist on dental care, but I've taken note of your question. Okay. I had lots of other questions up my sleeve. Thank you, Chair.
But so we're off to MP Blakey, please.
Sure. With apologies to Ms. David, I have a couple questions about the PSPIB. And in particular, like I understand the desire to have some of the expertise of folks that work at PSPIB evaluating investments be applied to growth fund investments. I'm just wondering, there's the question of expertise, but I guess I'm also wondering, is the expectation that those folks from PSPIB would also bring knowledge of projects or potential investments that have been brought to the PSPIB, and what would that look like, or how would that work? Is the expectation that investors will come independently to the growth fund, or is the expectation that PSPIB folks will bring some of their existing knowledge of existing proposals? How exactly is that interaction meant to work, or is there meant to be an interaction at all? Do you think it's worth considering whether there would need to be some safeguards or not in terms of folks that are involved with PSPIB being involved with investment decisions at the growth fund and going ahead, investing growth fund money in a project, but then also recommending PSPIB money be allocated to the same project? How does government imagine those interactions?
Thank you very much for the question. And so PSP will be managing the growth fund assets separately, and will be also managing its existing pension fund assets. So the two will be managed independently. There will be a new investment committee set up for growth fund investments. That investment committee will be totally separate and different from the PSP investment committee. In addition, PSP will establish conflicts of interest procedures in order to ensure that any conflicts of interest are properly managed, disclosed, and so that those investment decisions are made following those particular procedures. Of course, as an experienced investment manager, PSP will bring its existing knowledge in the field, its experience, its investment teams, the fact that it has seen projects and things like that. So that is the expertise that is being brought to the table. But in terms of investment decisions, they'll be made by two different committees with two different sets of people on them, according to proper conflicts of interest procedures.
So the idea is that
And just, sorry to interrupt, people, like just a little bit more distance. We are getting still quite a bit of feedback, Ms. David, but thank you, and just move any electronic devices away from the mic, and apologize for that. MP Blakey, your question.
Thank you. So am I hearing correctly that the idea is that there would be kind of a firewall between the regular PSPIB investment activity as a pension fund and whatever business is conducted for the growth fund? Does that mean that folks that are being seconded are properly being seconded? They're being brought over to do growth fund work, and they won't be doing any PSPIB work while they're assigned to evaluating growth fund investments?
Thank you for the question. So PSP will establish a subsidiary to manage growth fund assets, and so it'll be a separate investment team. That team would be dedicated to the growth fund, while the other PSP teams, the remaining ones, would be dedicated to the pension fund assets. Obviously, there's going to be economies of scale by sharing certain corporate functions, but the investment teams, including the investment decisions made by the investment committee, will be completely separate, and they will be done in a subsidiary of PSP, so a whole new entity within PSP.
Thank you, MP Blakey. And now to MP Davidson for 5 minutes.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chair. Save the best for last. We're going to talk about York Simcoe this afternoon. I don't know if anyone's ever been to the Soup and Salad Bowl of Canada, home to Lake Simcoe, ice fishing capital of Canada. Make sure you chime in if you have.
Shameless.
I know, it's unbelievable. I got a couple of questions. I haven't got through the BIA yet. I'm getting there. It's quite a document. My farmers in York Simcoe, again, the Holland Marsh, they're struggling. They're struggling, and just so colleagues understand, with the carbon tax. And why that matters is because half of my riding is on propane. And if we believe in natural gas being a bridge fuel, we don't even have the infrastructure there for natural gas for my farmers. And why that matters is because we dry onions, we dry beans, and a lot of other things. So that's the first reason they're struggling. And again, why that matters is they got hit with a 35% tariff. So on fertilizer. So we've kind of got a double whammy happening there, and they're watching outflows going outside the country, and they're kind of there on the outside looking in. So they're just wondering, was there anything in the budget, yes or no, for the fertilizer tariff to come back to farmers? Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, with respect to the measures that have been in place since March 2nd of last year, which applies a 35% tariff, those are only for the imports that would be of a certain form of nitrogen fertilizer coming in from Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Those would be maintained. The legislative amendment would just make that 35% permanent. And since then, fertilizer imports from Russia have been basically have diversified their sources. So the 35% has worked quite well.
Okay.
And
so I got to get through these questions. No, secondly, I noticed in the budget, and anyone can correct me as long, there's $650 million for the Great Lakes or the freshwater strategy. We've been waiting since 2016 for the Lake Simcoe Cleanup Fund to come back, that this government canceled. So that's $650 million over 10 years, which is $65 million a year for every Great Lake, Lake Winnipeg, the Winnipeg River, the Fraser Valley, where they had the floods. I'm just asking for York Simcoe, how is the allotment going to be set up with that $650 million? Does anyone know?
There's no one here today that would be able to answer that question, unfortunately.
Galen, thanks very much. Third question is, I had a concerning letter. My First Nations, our First Nation, I call it mine because my wife and my son are First Nation. I live on the First Nations, Chippewas of Regina Island. This government legalized cannabis, and they've got a great business center with a tobacco store, a cannabis store, and we had one of our chartered banks send a letter a couple months ago saying we're going to close your accounts because of our risk appetite. And I made inquiries and said, what's the risk appetite? They wouldn't quite say what the risk appetite was. And so they had over 40 employees, and you can understand they've got Visa machines, debit machines, payroll, checks, all those sort of things, had their account closed by a chartered bank, if you can believe it. Have you heard of anything like that? Finance Canada?
No, I'm not familiar with that particular case, no.
Okay. Lastly, I was reading the budget, and I was shaking it because I said there's got to be a couple of pages missing. I was looking for the financial vision for the country. Like, where is this government taking us? Where are we taking Canada? What is the vision for the country? Whatever that is. Did anyone find what the vision is for the Canada?
Endless deficits.
Like
Point
the
of order,
vision
Mr.
statement?
Chair. I appreciate the very intelligent questions of my colleague, but we're here to talk about the BIA, not the overall. It's for the government to respond to that question as opposed to our technical experts who helped us with the different parts.
No, but I thought
So MP Davidson, just if direct questions to the BIA.
Okay,
and
and so through you, I even thought the BIA. I was just looking for the vision for the country. My constituents keep asking me that. Where are you taking us? Where are we going? I just haven't found it. I thought it might be a simple answer that someone could just say, yeah, I know what the vision for the country is. Okay.
Great question.
Well, thank you,
Thank you,
MP
Mr. Chair.
Davidson, for that. And now we are actually going to our final questioner, and that's MP Zerowitz before we conclude this session. MP Zerowitz.
Thank you
for
so
5
much,
minutes.
Mr. Chair, and thanks again to all of you for your patience. I have one final question on the Canada Innovation Corporation. We've invested a lot in research and development in the past. And while we've done a really great job with Canadian researchers creating IP, a lot of foreign companies have come in to actually buy that IP and commercialize it elsewhere. And so I want to know whether there's anything right now within the framework of the Canada Innovation Corporation that's going to incentivize our R&D dollars to be partnered with Canadian innovators and the value being maintained here in Canada. Or is that something we have to wait for regulations or for programs to be created that we create that requirement?
Thanks for that question. Once again, Greg Reed from the Department of Finance. So within the BIA context, you'll see one of the functions outlined for the corporation is explicitly that it promote the development and retention of intellectual property. But as far as the specifics on the how, not within the legislation. You can look at the blueprint document that was released for some indications of how we think it may make sense to materialize in the corporation. Ultimately, that will be up to the CEO and the chair and the board as they develop and roll out those programs. But there are some specific ideas around, we talked about the asset collective, that these are examples of things that make sense, but really just the education and awareness up front for Canadian businesses as they think about R&D. Before they even undertake the R&D, have they thought about a path to making sure it can be retained in Canada, that the economic potential and value is realized in Canada? These are at the forefront of the policy thinking on the corporation.
Yeah, no, and so I do agree. So it's the education that needs to be really turbocharged, as I call it. But I'd also say that even our dollars that we give to our universities, we don't right now provide the incentives for university research to actually partner with Canadian innovators versus Google's and some of your international companies. And I think that's a loss for us right now. And so it's just come to my attention. And so right now I'm making sure everybody's aware of it so that we start making those corrections as we move forward. We also have in Division 24, Part 4, 25, Part 4, we have modernizing the National Research Council. Is there anything in that actually, in any of the changes that actually ensures that the R&D, not only like the R&D is partnered with Canadian innovators? Is there any incentives around that, or is there different objectives for the changes in the section?
So I understand there'll be another session with representatives from the National Research Council who will be able to talk to you in depth on those provisions. I apologize, I don't have the information today.
That's okay. My next set of questions is actually around the immigration changes. So Section 16, Section 17, and Section 19. And is there someone here to respond to that?
Not today. We're here for Divisions 1 to 9, 32 to 34, and 37.
I have such intelligent questions, though, for those. Okay, so I will go 1 to 9. I still have a minute and a half. Hold on. Let me see. No, thank you, though. Part 4, Division 2, strengthening the federal pension framework. So pensions, of course, is so important for Canadians. And I know for my riding of Davenport, they think about it all the time. And maybe just a general question, how will these changes benefit Canadians?
Thank you very much for the question. So what these amendments will do, they'll create a new federal framework for what are called variable
Ms. Rye, if you could just let us know who you are.
Sorry,
and,
yes. Kathleen Rye, Director of Pensions Policy at Finance Canada. So what these amendments will do, they'll create a federal framework for defined contribution plans and pooled registered pension plans to offer this new decumulation vehicle or drawdown in retirement called variable payment life annuities. So currently, unlike a defined benefit plan, which provides a lifetime retirement income, defined contribution plans and pooled registered pension plans, or PRPPs, provide a lump sum at retirement. So individuals are required to kind of manage their savings throughout retirement and the risk of outliving them. So what a variable payment life annuity will do, it'll allow individuals to take their lump sum at retirement and enter into this VPLA fund, which will be part of the larger pension plan, and then receive lifetime payments from the fund. But the payments will be adjusted for investment returns and the life expectancies of the other participants. So in this way, it's going to strengthen retirement security for these individuals because now they'll have this lifetime stream of retirement income.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zerowitz. And that is kind of concludes our meeting for today. And it was great to see everybody such great spirits today. Yeah, all the members, the staff, the interpreters, the team, everybody that is here. And I know why it is, because our great officials that are before us. And thank you so much for coming in and answering so many questions and your testimony for this study. We really appreciate it. So on behalf of our committee, we thank you, and that will conclude our meeting. Thank you. We're adjourned.